Hey, Nope family, it's Pastor Matt with your devotional thought for today. I thought for today it might be interesting as we consider the nearness of our Christmas, not only season, but our Christmas holiday where we celebrate the arrival, the first advent of our Savior, the birth of Jesus from the Virgin Mary and all that followed. I thought it'd be fitting to share a somewhat familiar passage from that time, as well as a few other passages that indicate who Jesus really was from the beginning until the end. And so let's look together at the Gospel of Matthew. Matthew 2:11. And going into the house, they saw the child with Mary his mother, and they fell down and worshipped him. Then, opening their treasures, they offered him gifts, gold and frankincense and myrrh. As you're likely familiar, this is the story of the Magi, or the wise men, who came from the east, saw the star in the east, and have come to worship him. This is not actually in the moment of Christ's birth or even shortly thereafter. This is likely within a year or 2 years even after his birth, that they've made this trek and followed the star as they sought to find him. But I find it really interesting. We know of the gold and the frankincense and the myrrh, although the significance of those is sometimes lost on us for why such valuable and precious gifts for this King of the Jews. And you can tell that they were coming to him, viewing him differently than other kings, because they didn't come and bow down and give him honor. They came to actually worship him. And these are not Jewish people. These are magi from the east. These are people coming from another nation who have received this revelation from the Lord, and they've come not only to bring him these gifts, but to actually worship him. Now that's an interesting thing, because if you look at the book of Deuteronomy, you know that God has commanded his own people that they should worship and serve the Lord their God. Worship the Lord their God and serve him only in Deuteronomy 6. And so with that command given, now we have people who are worshiping Jesus as a baby. But what I find fascinating is it doesn't just stop there. You go further on in the Gospel of Matthew and you find again in Matthew chapter 14 the following words. And those in the boat worshiped him, saying, truly, you are the Son of God. Now this is after Jesus came out walking on the water to the disciples in the boat, and there were storms around him. And that's why Peter gets out of the boat and he sees the wind and the waves, that they were contrary, that they were coming up, and it was overwhelming. This storm is happening, and Jesus climbs back into the boat with them. The storm's calm. But what's significant beyond all that is that these people worship him. And you know what? Jesus doesn't rebuke them. As a baby, he wouldn't have rebuked them at all, right? As a toddler, as a young child, he wouldn't have had the thought to rebuke them for worshiping him, but he didn't rebuke them then. And now he's an adult. He's actively in his ministry amongst his disciples, and now he is worshiped, and he doesn't rebuke them. And yet, as I said before, Deuteronomy, God's revealed word to us, says that we are only to worship the Lord our God and serve him only. Then continuing on after the resurrection, in Matthew 28, we see the following. And behold, Jesus met them and said, greetings. And they came up and took hold of his feet and worshiped him. As I mentioned, this is after Jesus' resurrection, and this is when Mary Magdalene and the other Mary have come to the tomb to find it empty, and an angel appears to them, and all this happens. And as they go from the directive of the angel to tell the other disciples about the resurrection, on their way, Jesus meets them and gives them these greetings. And their response is to cling to his feet, to fall at his feet and worship him. And after that, our risen Lord doesn't rebuke them either. In fact, he tells them, do not be afraid. Go and tell the other disciples to meet me in Galilee, and they will also see me. They will see me there. Then, actually, later on in Matthew 28, all the disciples gather and they worship him, and he receives their worship. He doesn't rebuke them for their worship. And yet we know that only God should be worshiped. And so the reason I wanted to share this is because Jesus, from the very beginning to the end, has been God. He is eternal, the eternal God-man. And so even though at this time in Matthew chapter 2, Jesus is God. And so we have other world religions that try to claim that Jesus is not God, that you only worship the Lord, but you don't worship, Jesus as God. Jesus is the firstborn of creation. He's a created being. No, Jesus is the eternal Son of God who is fully and truly God himself. And he receives worship rightly from the beginning till the very end. And when you jump ahead to the book of Revelation, you see the worship that our Savior, Jesus, the eternal Son of God, truly man, receives, because he is God. And so, brothers and sisters, this Christmas season, as we think about what happened when the Magi came shortly after his birth, like I said, within the first couple of years of his life, and they worshiped him. And then we see as an adult, he was worshiped. And then we see as a risen Lord, he was worshiped. We need to choose to worship him because he is God and he is worthy of our worship. So let's choose this Christmas to worship Jesus as he is due the worship of every single one of us.